Task Force TV, live from the 27th National Conference on LGBTQ Equality, Creating Change in Denver, Colorado.
Thanks for joining us for our On the Run Politini edition here live at Creating Change's 27th annual conference in Denver, Colorado. We are so excited to be here with Politini, serving your politics and pop culture up with a twist. I'm Danielle Moddle-Mills.
And I'm Aisha Moddle-Mills.
And we are here with our fabulous guests, Stacey Long, Policy Director of the Task Force.
Stacey Long Simmons.
Simmons, I'm sorry, girl, she's married now.
Yes. And we have Carlos Padilla of the Queer Undocumented Immigrant Project. So we want to talk about immigration, y'all. There are 11 million undocumented people in the United States, and some of the folks that we don't talk a whole lot about are all of the LGBT undocumented. So I just want to jump right in, and could you, Carlos, tell us how many undocumented LGBT people are there in the United States?
Currently, the William Institute reported that there's over 267,000 undocumented LGBTQ adults over the age of 18 in this country currently. That is not including the asylum-seeking population that comes through the country seeking protections from other countries that criminalize homosexuality.
So the president has issued an executive order to take some action. Tell us a little bit about how that's going to impact these folks.
Yeah, so I think after many years of organizing, finally the president moved on immigration action. He's going to be granting relief from deportation to nearly 5 million families, which is an amazing opportunity for many of us to come out of the shadows and no longer live in fear. I particularly was one of those candidates that qualified for the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrival.
Dream.
For the DREAM. We call it the DACA. Unfortunately, my father didn't qualify because the current DAPA qualifications, which is Deferred Action for Parents Accountability, requires for the person to have a child that's either a U.S. citizen or permanent resident. Now, these actions, unfortunately, because it requires for someone to have a U.S. citizen child or permanent resident, create some systemic barriers for LGBTQ couples. As we all know, LGBTQ families have for a long time in the U.S. been neglected and rejected, and I think it's something that we need to continue fighting so that our communities is no longer left behind.
So, Stacey, we know that we are winning marriage across the country, right? We're up to, 32 states right now?
I can't even keep count.
I can't even, that's exciting
right.
that I can't keep count of how many states we're winning.
Right.
But what does the current state of marriage unfolding across the country mean, if anything, for undocumented LGBT people who may have gotten married, have a spouse that is a United States citizen? Does that help them in any way?
Sure. So actually, one of the things that happened was the couples who are married are actually getting recognition under the current policy. So it wasn't related to what the president did under the executive order. It had more to do with the Windsor decision and the fact that the agency that oversees this made it possible for those couples to have legal recognition. So, but that's just one piece of the problem. Actually, anything having to do with the populations that Carlos has described impacts all of us in one way or another. There are loved ones that we have, there are children that our children play with who are impacted, there are employment situations that we're all sort of interfaced with, and until we fix the system in a full and effective way, in a way that's fair and comprehensive, we're always going to have continued ongoing problems. And I hope that we'll have an opportunity to talk in particular about the violence that many of the people who we care about are encountering when they're being held either in detention or in some other way coming into contact with the system.
Well, break that down a little bit. I think we might have a second for this because it's something I just learned recently about what this detention system looks like for undocumented people. Now, technically, they are not criminals, right?
Oh, no.
This is civil detention, but they're being treated like criminals. So could you say a little bit about that?
It's being held behind bars. And this came to the height, right, over the summer. I remember that because there were 20,000, 30,000 young children that were crossing the border. I forget over the summer, I forget what month that it was, but we actually started to see, well, where are they taking these kids?
What are those
and what conditions are they existing in?
Well, one of the things that you should know right off the bat is that individuals who are being held in detention, as you said, are not criminals. They are people who have been caught attempting to cross the border or have been identified in their communities by some official who has asked for papers that they actually don't possess. And so they're being held in a facility until their process unfolds. However, the problem is, for transgender people in particular, the detention rate is 15 times as high.
Wow.
If you're a transgender person. Living in this country, you are more subject to scrutiny, you're more subject to coming into contact with the criminal justice system, you're more likely to sort of, be picked on, basically.
Right.
And the conditions under which people are living are really horrible. You're not having necessarily access to medical care, you're not being treated with dignity or respect. In fact, you're in jeopardy. And we have heard some horrible stories about people being assaulted by officials who are actually paid to ensure your well-being. So there's definitely room for us to continue advocating and making sure that we eradicate some of the really horrible stuff that's happening to folks.
So just final question, how do you all continue, right, in the face of a Republican Congress? We know that we're probably not going to see a bill done. Maybe we will, I don't know, before the president leaves office, who knows. But how do you continue in your organizations to elevate the stories of LGBTQ undocumented immigrants? How
well, I
will
want
you
to
continue
just
to
take
do that?
one piece of that, and then Carlos, let you take it from there. The thing that we're doing now is playing serious defense, because there are bills being introduced in the House and in the Senate related to funding for the Department of Homeland Security that really is trying to undo the great progress that the president has already put forward with respect to the programs we talked about earlier, DAPA and DACA. So defunding the administrative relief is going to be a big problem and a step backward. And we're actually having to make sure that the implementation of those programs goes seamlessly while we still build support for perhaps a future Congress to actually get the job done right and fully comprehensively.
Yeah. So I think I wanted to add one more last point to the immigration detention topic. I think as we need to remember that immigration detention is not, again, the criminal justice system. This is a civil offense, and people are just placed there in order for when the judge gets to decide the fate of their future, whether they stay in the country or not. And the crisis that's happening with particularly LGBTQ detainees in detention is outrageous. I think, as Stacey mentioned, it's been proven that detention centers cannot protect the safety and well-being of our communities in detention centers. And I think for many of us, one of the suggestions that we've said that an alternative to detention is key, in order to make sure that our folks are protected and that their well-being is the number one priority. Now, as for the current, with this Congress and how they've worked together to somehow sabotage any actions that the president has done, within United We Dream, the largest immigrant youth-led network in the country, we're setting ourselves up to making sure that at any corner, at any moment that a member of Congress decides to challenge that we're there with our stories, putting a face to the issue and making sure that they know that any actions for them to defund this program is an action to separate American families.
Well, thank you again for reminding us that immigration reform is absolutely an LGBTQ issue. And again, we're excited to be here at the Task Force 27th Annual Creating Change Conference to talk about all these intersectional issues that have to do with LGBT folks. It's a little bit more than marriage, y'all, so we're glad that you're tuned in and checking out all the conversations that we have over the weekend.
Task Force TV, live from the 27th National Conference on LGBTQ Equality, Creating Change in Denver, Colorado.